Hello everybody, well welcome to this Protection Insight podcast. Joining me today is Stuart Easton, who is a key account manager over at Aviva, and today we're going to take a look at how to complete a trust form with Aviva for a protection policy. So welcome to the podcast today, Stuart. How are you?
Fine, thanks, Vince. Welcome everybody.
Okay, so to get started, what we need to do is we actually need to find the trust form on the Aviva website. Now, I'm sure you're already used to using the connect.avivab2b.co.uk, and to find the list of different trust forms for Aviva protection policies, all we need to do is go to Advisor, Protection, let's click on Life Insurance, and then you can see here we've got an area called Key Documents. Now, if we view the document library, what you'll see there is we do have a section called Trust Documents, and there are all sorts of different trust forms available. What we're going to focus on today is for our normal case study, which is a single life policy for an unmarried couple. So the trust document that we need to use, Stuart, is actually called the Aviva Discretionary Gift Trust. So let's open that up. So what we're going to do is complete the trust form, and Stuart's going to guide me through the various parts. So if we open up the PDF, now you can see here, Stuart, this is an Aviva Discretionary Gift Trust for Protection. Can you just explain exactly how this works in terms of what types of policies it takes?
So Vince and everybody on the podcast, it's a trust form that you can use for either a single life or a joint life policy. I think the thing to bear in mind is once the trust has been created, you can't cancel it. And you have to remember that creating that trust has got taxation as well as legal implications. What we would say to as customers, you are giving them their advice in the hands of completing the actual trust form, and obviously you are giving them the customer the advice around that trust.
Yeah, and it says on the first page there, Stuart, it says we strongly recommend you take legal and or financial advice before setting up a trust. Of course, that line of text is not aimed at you, the advisor, it's aimed at your client. So if your client happens to have an Aviva policy and they want to think about whether it's worth putting the policy into trust, it's actually addressing them. So it says that on the next line down, this is the final line that's in bold text. If you've got any concerns about whether creating a trust is right for you, please discuss this with your legal or financial advisor. So of course, you're the financial advisor. So I think what's interesting about this trust form, obviously this is the PDF. This is going to be the trust form that we use for any business which is already in force. Aviva do have an online trust process, so any new business, you can actually use the online process, which is fantastic. Discretionary, we know the word discretionary means choice, so the discretionary there that we're talking about is for the trustees. The trustees have got discretion. Gift means that anything we put into this trust is given away, so that's a key point to bear in mind. And of course, you can see there quite clearly it says protection, so this will work with a protection policy. So Stuart, if we just work our way down the trust form, and you can see at the bottom of page 1 there's some handy guidance notes there how to complete the trust form, and it says there you complete the trust deed in black ink. We can actually compose most of it on the computer, can't we, Stuart?
Yes, so effectively the document is what I would call an editable PDF. So you can complete all of the sections online, but obviously once you've completed it, then you can print everything off in order for the signatures to be added at the appropriate time.
Okay, so let's work our way down onto page number 3. So there's lots of legalese, but we're going to focus on the bits that you need to do to complete the job. I think what's really good about this, Stuart, is these handy little, what I would call post-it notes on the right-hand side of every single section where something needs to be completed. Now, the first one's quite interesting because it says, insert the date when the last person, in brackets, the settlor or trustee, signs the document. And then it says in bold black text, don't backdate or forward date this deed. So effectively, we can leave that blank for the time being, can't we, Stuart?
So when you're first completing this document, I would leave that blank and insert that date, but on the last date upon which the last person has actually signed, be that the settlor or any of the additional trustees.
Yeah, so the last person to actually put a date on the form, that's when it's time to come back to page 3 of the Aviva Trust form and actually put the date in. So we're going to leave that blank for the time being. Now it says there by full name of settlor 1 and address of settlor 1. So I guess if I type in there, Stuart, the name and the address of settlor 1, I'll put the postal code in there. Now, it also says settler 2, and you did mention before at the beginning joint life policies. As this is a gift trust, I suppose you've got to ask yourself the question, if you've got a joint life first death policy, would you want to give it all away? In other words, if one of them dies but one of them survives, would you want the monies to be gifted away to somebody else, away from the lives assured in that instance? So I suppose what it's doing here is it lets you write joint life policies and put them into trust, but realistically, Stuart, you'd actually use a different trust, wouldn't you?
Yes, you would. This type of trust is obviously mainly suitable for a single life policy where you're trying to give the benefits away to a named or a chosen group of beneficiaries. However, if it was a joint life policy, I would recommend the Aviva Survivor Trust, which allows you to essentially, if both parties died at the same time, it means that provided one party lives for at least 31 days, then the benefits then don't form part of the overall estate. But obviously, if they both die within 31 days, at that point, the benefits then goes to the trustees, and then they would then appoint them or pay the monies out in accordance with the rules of the trust.
Yeah. So it's another area that we're going to look into in a different podcast. I think really the key rule with this particular type of trust is we're talking here about single life policies, whether it's single life insurance or single life and critical illness policies. So on this next section, Stuart, you can see here it says herein called the settler. There are bits of legalese throughout the form. So effectively what we're seeing there is if we've got two settlers, it actually calls those two settlers the settler.
The settler.
It's just a piece of legal. It's just a piece of legal.
Legal jargon is you've got settler 1 and settler 2, but they're then called the settler going forward as far as the trust document is concerned.
Okay, good stuff. So let's fill in the next bit then. So after the settler, we need to fill in the names and addresses of the trustees. Now you can see if we look at our post-it note, it says the full name, including middle names and addresses of any additional trustees being appointed should be included. You're automatically a trustee, so you don't need to include your name. Again, we strongly recommend that at least one additional trustee is appointed. Okay, so let's fill in the names and addresses of the trustees, the additional trustees. So if I fill in the name of the first trustee, I actually have 3 here. It's good to see that we can identify each of them by way of date of birth. That isn't typical of every life company. And we put in there the address of the trustee and the postcode. And if I fill in number 2, and then let's fill in number 3. So I've got 3 additional trustees and I've also got a settler created. So that's everything on page 3, Stuart.
Yeah, that's right, Vince. And just to remember, you need at least one additional trustee to obviously administer the trust in the event of a claimable event.
Okay, so if we move down to page 4, Stuart, we've got the constitution of the trust. Sounds a bit grand, but what it's talking about here is policy numbers. So you can see on the post-it notes on the right-hand side, insert your policy number. So we're going to use this predominantly where we've got a life insurance policy that is already in force. So if we put our policy number into the first box, but also you can actually add up to 5 more in the additional boxes there. The post-it note on the right-hand side says, please insert any additional policy numbers you want to be assigned and held in trust. Again, bold letters, you can't change your mind, and all the policies you've listed will be subject to the terms of this trust. So if there are little policies, I suppose it makes sense to wrap them up in the trust, but that's easy enough. Okay, so if we move down to Part D, definitions. Now, this is where we actually get some classifications for beneficiaries. It says there on the post-it note, please list the full name, including middle names of each default beneficiary, your children or grandchildren, for example, who you want to benefit from the trust, along with the percentage share of the trust that you want to get to them. The total percentage share between the default beneficiaries should total 100%. So in here, Stuart, we will actually need to put in the names of the default beneficiaries, won't we?
Yes, you do. Yes. So put down who is going to benefit as a result of this particular trust.
Okay, so we'll put the default beneficiaries in there. Of course, you might want to be a bit more articulate by writing that letter of wishes. And of course, take a look at the Letter of Wishes podcast if you want to know a bit more detail about that. So if we move our way down the page, so if we go onto page 5, you can see there all those potential beneficiaries listed there. So that's people, family members, spouses, children, remote descendants of the settler. Very typical of these discretionary trust forms. But the bit I really like, Stuart, here, because it's in plain English, is Part E, principal trust terms. So just talk me through this one, Stuart.
So Vince, the benefit of these split types of trusts means that in the event of, say, a terminal illness or an earlier critical illness claim, the benefits from that claim can be paid to the settler rather than to the trustees for them to distribute to the beneficiaries as per the trust. What you'll probably find is that if in the event of, say, a critical illness claim, for example, the settler themselves will probably want that money to use that money as they want, rather than the benefits going to the beneficiaries. So by not ticking those boxes, it means that the settler keeps the benefits for themselves to do as they want, rather than the benefits forming part of the trust.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the post-it notes on the right-hand side there, Stuart, I think for the terminal illness, nice and clear, it says there, if you tick this box, you won't get any money from a terminal illness claim. Doesn't get any more clear than that. It means that any money from the claim will be held by the trustees for the beneficiaries. So it's nice and clear. At least you've got the choice. Some providers don't give you that choice about terminal illness. Certainly when it comes to critical illness, total permanent disability, this will cater for a life or earlier critical illness policy. And again, if you do feel you need to give those benefits away, you've got the ability to do so. But you can see on the page there, the default position is that they will be retained until you tick those boxes and give them away. So let's work our way down. I think we're nearly there now, Stuart. If we work our way down to page 8, this is where we start picking up some signatures. So just talk me through what I need to do here, Stuart.
So essentially, again, that the post-it note on the right hand side of the document is very, very clear. But essentially, the settler will need to sign, and they will have to then have that witnessed. The witness can be the advisor themselves, but as long as the witness is over 18, and they can't be a trustee of the deed, but essentially as long as they've got their name and address and they've been signed by a witness, then that's fine. That's all we need, as long as they're over 18.
Yeah, so as an advisor, you won't be a trustee and you won't be a settler. So you will be able to act as the witness, as Stuart says there. So if we talk about these signatures that are needed, certainly that is one that you can tackle quite easily. So the settler is the client, that's the life assured. So we'll put the name and address of the witness in that box there. Now we'll leave the second settler because this isn't really going to be a trust that we'll ever use for joint life policies. And then if we move down to page 9, this is the final page really where we need to capture some signatures. These are where we've captured the signatures of the trustees. So each trustee needs to sign, and again you can see that in the post-it note on the right hand side, in the presence of a witness. So it makes a lot of sense really that if we're talking about trustees of your client, why not create some rules that says they need to be relatively contactable, within the vicinity. It's not always going to be possible, but it makes a lot of sense because if you've got to go and have a conversation with them about what their role is and about how this is going to work in the event of a claim in the future, it does make a lot of sense if you're dealing with that a bit more local. So we'll need a signature for the witness as well as the trustees, and you can see we've got boxes there for each of those trustees. So that really is the end of the form as it needs to be completed. We've now got this submission checklist at the very back of the form, Stuart. Just talk us through what we need to do to make sure that we've done everything correctly and then what we need to do with the actual trust form.
So essentially, once you got to the end of the document and you've actually completed it all, then there's a checklist which tells you what you've got to do next and making sure that you've adhered to all of the bits and pieces. So essentially, make sure the trust deed is dated, but with the date after the last person, either the settler or the trustee has signed it, making sure that the settlers have all filled in their names and addresses, and that the trustees again have filled in their names and addresses. And as we said before, we recommend that you have at least one additional trustee. Obviously, in Part C, make sure you've entered the policy numbers. And again, in Part G, make sure that the settlers and the trustees that are named in Part A have signed everything in Part G. So once you've completed the trust form, you need to send the completed document to the Business Data Capture Centre, which is Aviva PO Box 520, Norwich, NR1 3WG, and that address should appear on your screen now.
So as Stuart just says there, the key thing really, once you've gotten to this stage of the trust form, you've filled it all in, we've got everybody to sign it. Now we need to go back to the beginning and actually put a date now that everybody has signed and dated the trust form. Okay, so thanks very much, Stuart, for joining me today and walking us through how to complete the Aviva discretionary gift trust for an Aviva protection policy. I hope you found the podcast useful, and until next time, it's bye for now.